On this week's episode, we have Lisa Franz, who has traveled to 53 countries and currently lives in Bolivia, where she runs an online company, Nutrition, Coaching, and Life. We covered a lot of ground, with some highlights including you want 80 to 90% of your diet to be from quality whole foods. For each person, and this is becoming a theme when working with a coach or provider, they need to ask you a lot of questions to figure out the right program for you. Everyone is different. And then create a plan with the right mix of vegetables, proteins, and carbs. And most importantly, food should and will bring you joy and energy if you're taking the right approach to your diet, mindset, sleep, exercise, and community. And now to our conversation with Lisa. Hello and welcome to the podcast, Eat Better Food Today. I'm your host, Ken Coonahan, and I'm excited to be sharing insights on why we believe that health longevity begins with the food we eat. The goal of this podcast will be to inspire, educate, and enable folks to live a healthier life and do it affordably. My wife and I have been on this journey for over 11 years and continue to work on it every single day. Percent of the profits from this podcast will be put towards child hunger, with an initial focus on the poor suburb in America, East Cleveland, Ohio. As a reminder, please subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast. These are the lifeblood of any podcast. Our sponsor is Cleveland Kitchen. Think of Cleveland Kitchen as providing easy gut health with their fermented foods, which means better brain health with just 2 forkfuls a day. On this episode, we're grateful to have Lisa Franz. Lisa has an MS in exercise science, health promotion, and nutrition. She is the owner and head coach at Nutrition, Coaching, and Life and host of the Nutrition and Life podcast. After struggling through various diets herself, Lisa learned about the evidence-based way to change weight and body composition, which she has been fascinated with nutrition and building muscle ever since. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a true pleasure to be here.
Great to have you as well. So I always start my first question here. I already mentioned we both had a workout this morning, had breakfast. So my first question is what you had for breakfast this morning.
Oh, well, I have had a good strength training, so I need to refuel my body with some good carbohydrates and also some protein, of course, protein being the important component there. And I had some oats, but I mixed some eggs and egg whites in it, and some flax seeds, some chia seeds, and put a bit of almond butter and papaya on top of it. So delicious.
Nice. Very nice.
What about yourself? What's your go-to breakfast?
So I had yogurt this morning. I had chia seeds in there. I had flax seeds. I used something called mud water, which is kind of a turmeric. There's some other ingredients in there, some mushroom extracts and such in there. Kind of a little bit of whey, a little bit of creatine, and mix it all up.
Nice.
Add some
Sounds like a good
blueberries
snack.
and good to go. So
Awesome. Very good for brain and body.
exactly. So can you start sharing your journey into your present? You're the owner and head coach in Nutrition Life Coaching. You've got the podcast, but you've journeyed into that space. What's some of your journey to get to where you're at today?
For sure, absolutely. I'll try to keep it somewhat brief or at least relevant. So, I have always been excited about physical activity and movement. And as a teenager, I never necessarily had to watch my weight or anything like that. It just kind of naturally was reasonably lean. But when I finished high school, I went on a trip around the world and I stopped exercising completely. And so I basically gained about 20 pounds in the course of that 1 year, just celebrating life a little bit too much, perhaps. But thankfully, yeah, thankfully, before heading off on that trip, I had already enrolled in a university degree for exercise science and got back into the swing of things, obviously being in that environment and so on, and wanted to lose weight for the very first time. And my first professor there at the university, she was very old school and was advocating for a low-fat approach. So she literally just low-fat yogurts, low-fat cheeses, like all pretty old school, I guess, 90s sort of philosophy. And I did that, and I lost a little bit of weight. But then I kind of stalled out. And my next professor, she was super into low carb. Everything low carb had to be low carb. So I kind of piled that on top of the low fat philosophy, lost a little bit more weight, and then I sort of stalled out. And on top of all of that, I just always felt restricted because at that point I also started doing more exercise in the form of high intensity training, so like CrossFit type exercise, and that requires a lot of energy. But I was stuck with this low fat, low carb approach, basically just eating vegetables and protein, always thinking to myself, like, what the heck? I'm basically just living for my cheat day weekends, and during the week I'm suffering. And I sort of got into the new paleo diet
Mhm.
thing as well with CrossFit, just minus the carbs and kind of low fat still. So again, pretty much just protein and vegetables, and always found myself really deprived to the point that even on my honeymoon at the time I was traveling through Thailand, and we were doing a really great workout in the morning and then went to the food court to get some breakfast. And I remember looking around and suddenly I started crying because I was like, I can't eat any of this. I can't eat the dish with the fried rice. I can't even eat the omelet because they deep fry it in like canola oil. I can't eat this other thing because it has added sugar to it. Like, what the heck am I supposed to eat? I literally stood there crying. And so in that moment I decided, I was like, I'm gonna find a way that I can enjoy life, because I truly like, I'm super passionate about life itself. Like, I love traveling, I love going for a nice dinner, I love just in general, like, I have a lot of passion. But at the same time, I always thought there has to be a way that I can feel good in my body, look good in my body, and not going through these constant cycles of like super restricting during the week and then basically binging on the weekends and then just over restricting again. And so I went on this quest and basically just wanted to investigate more and more of like, okay, how do I do this strategically? I'm also a very logical person. I'm German originally, so I have a very strategic, logical thinking mind, and wanted to kind of hear more about the philosophy, because believe it or not, in my entire university education, yes, we talked about this is a quote unquote good food, this is a quote unquote bad food, but we never
Mhm.
talked about the laws of thermodynamics. Like, nobody within this entire time mentioned, okay, this is how much calories a person of, I don't know, 6 feet two needs if they play basketball 5 times a week or whatever. Like, literally, at no point did anybody talk about this. So at some point, I actually just stumbled upon an article by a CrossFit athlete at the time, and she wrote an article which was titled "How Donuts Gave Me Abs and a 90 kg Snatch." So for those of you listening who are not familiar with Olympic lifting, 90 kg snatch is just a very heavy lift that is super impressive to do for a female. Well, actually for anybody, but for a female in particular. And I was thinking to myself, I want all three of these things. I want abs, I want donuts, and I want this heavy lifting ability. So I looked at the article, and basically she explained about the laws of thermodynamics, meaning that essentially, regardless of what diet we follow and if it's successful or not, it all comes down to calories in, calories out. Of course, there's a lot more nuance to it. Food quality does matter. And
Mhm.
amongst that, she also explained that the macro distribution, so how many proteins, how much carbs, and how much fats of that, plays a huge, huge role as well. So it's not as straightforward as just calories in, calories out, especially if we're also having hormonal issues or anything like that. But what for me, that was just really like eye opening. Basically, like, oh, are you telling me that if I can have a slice of bread from time to time and I'm not automatically gonna get fat? And at the same time, because for instance, I was in this whole paleo thing. So at the time, something called bulletproof coffee was super popular. I don't
Yes.
know if
Yeah.
anybody listening to
Very
this
familiar with
resonates with that, but it's basically you brew yourself a very strong coffee, and then you add like a tablespoon of MCT oil and a tablespoon of butter and a tablespoon of coconut oil or whatever in there. And I was like, this is how I start my day. And I didn't really realize that even though it's quote unquote healthy, it has like 400 calories. So, like, there were certain things where I was of the belief of, as long as it's healthy, I can have as much of that as possible, or like, it doesn't matter how much, even if it's 5 eggs and an avocado and, I don't know, half a kilo of salmon or so. And at the same time, I had this ridiculous belief that even if I ate the smallest amount of sugar or processed carbs like bread or whatever, I would inherently get fat. And so simply learning that in the end, I don't have to over restrict all the time. And yes, of course, I want 80-90% of my food quality to be from whole foods, from good quality foods, from natural
Mhm.
foods, from unprocessed foods, sure. But if I reserve, 10-20% to a little bit more flexibility, I can from time to time have a glass of wine with my partner. I can, eat a bit of brownie at my niece's birthday. I'm not going to die from that. So that was really, really eye opening to me. And once I started following or calculating more specifically what my needs were, what my portions should look like, what my distribution of carbs, protein, and fats should be, I saw body composition changes very quickly and performance changes also. So I was never like super chubby, or I mean, aside from gaining those 20 pounds during the trip, I was still looking well, but I always thought, why don't I look like I work out? Like I
Mhm.
it wasn't showing definition. So as soon as I kind of switched or adjusted my macros and I adjusted my food quantity, I started leaning out very, very quickly. And at the same time, actually, my performance in the gym improved, my sleep improved, and everything else. And so I was like, I want to teach as many people as possible about this. And at the time, I should have mentioned, Ken, that I actually took a little bit of a detour because when I finished my studies, I did not really know what to do with an exercise science degree at the time. I knew I didn't want to go into research. I didn't want to be a PT straight away or anything like that. So I actually became a police officer in New Zealand for some years. And during the time, though, like it was a very interesting job. I learned a lot about myself and humanity as well, but it was never my passion. And so, even while I was at work, I was already thinking about my training. I was already thinking about how I can help other people with nutrition. So, I got some more nutrition certifications and I built up to be an online nutrition coach so that by the time I left the police, I would already be working part time. At that stage, I worked for another company. It's called Tailored Coaching Method. They essentially also do nutrition and online training. And then 2 years after working for them, I started my own company, Nutrition Coaching and Life, where we do the same. We help people lose body fat, improve their body composition, gain more muscle, and just their relationship with food, really, which is the most important thing to me because for me, life is too short to, well, number one, be in a body that you don't like. And number two, to just constantly be limited by food. Food should be something that brings you more joy, more energy, and actually contributes to a better life rather than making you feel super restricted.
So you talked a little bit about thermodynamics, and then I've read evidence-based ways to change. Get a little bit more into kind of the philosophy. Everybody's different, right? I mean, everybody. So, and I agree with you 100%. People need to enjoy what they're eating. You just can't restrict yourself. That's just painful. So, how do you just philosophically? You're coaching somebody. Everybody's different. So, kind of how do you get them started on a new direction, new path?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think what I want people to understand when I say evidence-based is just it's something that's an approach that's not dogmatic. And dogmatic meaning we hear a lot of people or see a lot of people who have success with something, let it be keto, let it be going vegan, let it be
Mm-hmm.
intermittent fasting or whatever. And because it worked for them and they saw some success with that, they pull like a study or two and then just say, this is how everyone has to eat. This is the best way. This is the bee's knees and everything else is wrong. That, in my opinion, is a dogmatic approach. And the sad thing is that you can pretty much find a study to support anything, but when we look at the research, we have to dig a little bit deeper. Is this a meta-analysis, so like a study of studies, where we actually have a lot of research backing up a certain claim, for instance, when it comes to the benefits of protein or something like that, or the benefits of creatine? You mentioned creatine earlier on. That is something that has been backed up very, very well by a lot of studies, and you pretty much probably, or like I dare you to find a study that would claim that that's bad for you to take creatine or so.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but on the other side, some people find like one poorly done study that says that keto is great for something, and they don't look deeper. They don't look like, was it done on males only? Was it done on males that are in their 20s? Or was it done on a menopausal woman that is in her 50s that is struggling with hormones? And so if I'm talking to someone, I always need to consider who they are. You can't apply one
Hmm.
thing to the other person. So you asked how I approach it when someone wants to improve their life or wants to coach with us, and that's exactly where we start. We want to get to know the individual better, so it's going to come with a lot of questions. How active are you? Have you dieted before? Because if someone has never done a diet, they're going to respond very differently to something than someone who's been yo-yo dieting for the last 20 years, whose metabolism is probably quite compromised for now. So that's very different. And again, we also need to talk about personal preference. Are you someone who likes eating breakfast, or are you someone who's rather waiting until 11 a.m. because in the morning you're busy running around anyway and you can't actually digest food that well? So those are all things that need to be taken into consideration. Nonetheless, we do have overarching themes that apply to, let's just say, the majority of people in the world. And there's a great quote, I unfortunately forget but who it's by, but it's along the lines of methods are many, principles are few, methods change often, and principles never do. And what that basically means is a method to reduce your calorie intake might be, I'm starting intermittent fasting, I'm cutting out one of the meals, and therefore I'm creating a calorie deficit, or I am cutting out meat, and because of that, I'm eating just more vegetables, which are not as dense in calories. So I'm essentially creating a calorie deficit. The principle here is we want to create a calorie deficit in order to lose weight. So how
Hmm.
you go about that is kind of up to the individual. But another principle along the side of that would be something that I said earlier. In my opinion, 80-90% of the foods should be from whole foods, from minimally processed foods, ideally. And on that front, also the principle that yes, everybody benefits from eating a decent amount of protein in order to maintain or even build muscle mass as we're in a calorie deficit. So if someone is listening to this and they're thinking, okay, cool, Lisa, that's all great. I don't want to hire a nutrition coach, or I can't afford nutrition coaching. What I always recommend for almost anyone starting off with is just for at least a little while, keep a food diary or track what you're currently eating in an application. And it always sounds kind of tedious, and yes, it is, weighing out your food or recording your food for a little while. But what that simply does is it creates awareness and it gives us a starting line. Let's just say you have the intention of going to Las Vegas. If you don't know where you currently are, how are you going to figure out how to get there? And it's kind of the same thing. If you don't know if you're currently eating 1500 calories or 2500, how do you know what calorie deficit is going to work for you? Like, should you start with 1200, or is actually just reduce give it like going for 2000 sufficient? You don't really know. So if you currently have no idea of how much you're eating, I highly recommend just tracking your food for a little while. And actually, often when I say that to people, even just by recording their food for a while, they actually lose a little bit of weight, even without aiming for any particular number. It's just because you might skip a little bite and lick and zip here and there because you would have to record it. Or you're simply thinking like, if I go back for another piece of chocolate, I have to enter that again. Maybe I don't need it. So again, like it just kind of creates awareness. And on top of that, for me personally, when I did that for the very first time, it was so eye-opening because again, things that I thought were quote unquote healthy and might be healthy as well, I didn't realize how high in calories they were. For instance, nut butter or so. Like nut butter is super healthy. We have some healthy fats there. But if you have like your 2 heaped tablespoons of nut butter and you just kind of lick them on the go and not realizing that's like 300 calories here and there, for someone of a smaller size, that's going to add up over the course of the day. If you do the same with salad dressings and you just pour a half a cup of dressing over your salad, or a half a cup of olive oil over your baking tray when you're cooking at dinner. All these things, yes, super healthy, but healthy things have calories too. So we want to create awareness around that. And on the flip side, I thought things that were high in protein really weren't that high in protein. So for example, cool, yes, eggs are an awesome source of protein, sure, but one egg actually only has like 6 or 7. So if someone grams of protein. So if someone wanted to aim for, 30, 40 grams of protein in one meal, that would be a lot of eggs. You need to kind of add something else to that, or balance it out with some egg whites or something like that. So it's, for me, recording your food intake is really where it starts, because it's an educational tool that, if done correctly, you can benefit from for the rest of your life. What I sometimes see people quote unquote do wrong when they use fitness or food trackers like MyFitnessPal, Chronometer, My Macros, or whatever it might be for the first time, is they enter what they want to achieve. So let's say weight loss, and the app gives you just a generic, very generic target. And unfortunately, these targets are super low most of the time, so over restrictive, and they don't account for the macro distribution. So I've heard many people come to me and say, "Oh, Lisa, I don't want to track my macros. I've done this before and I just couldn't stick with it." And I'm like, "Okay, well, what kind of target did the tracker give you?" And it turns out it was like, yeah, 1,200 or so for someone who could easily be eating or losing weight on 1,800 calories. And no wonder that that's not sustainable. So I always want to aim and find the lowest effective dose that we can do, and then building on that, because that also creates success and momentum, rather than aiming for something that's so difficult to do that you actually have that, "Oh, I'm a failure" kind of feeling again. And of course, nobody wants that when it comes to dieting and then just going back to their old habits.
So talk a little bit. So we both went to the gym this morning. We both had breakfast that we talked about. So nutrition with training. I mean, they're not interdependent. They're dependent on. You can't just be on a diet and then be sedentary. It just doesn't work that way. So I guess talk a little bit about that. I go to the gym 5 days a week. I've seen people there. They're there 5 days a week too. They don't look any different 2 years after they've been there. The diet impacts, you can't just do one without the other. So I guess talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, there are so many points to that, Ken. So, first of all, I totally agree they should always go hand in hand. I mean, hypothetically, yes, we can lose weight without addressing physical activity, but it's always going to be easier and healthier and better if we add in the exercise as well. So, I mean, just from an energy expenditure, you're going to create a bigger, easier calorie deficit than if you have to reduce all your calories from just food alone. That's kind of the first point. And secondly, also, if we don't use our muscles during the time of a diet, it is a lot more likely that we lose muscle mass as well as body fat, and not the majority from our weight loss coming from fat, which is what we want, because nobody wants to look skinny fat at the end of a diet.
Right.
And yes, it is. It's also very metabolically active tissue, so muscle burns more calories at rest than body fat. So if you're listening to this and you're like, "I don't really want to look muscly," or "I don't really care to be super super strong," still everybody in the world should think about retaining more muscle mass, or simply wanting to use our muscles, because it's also good for posture. It is good in the long run for living autonomously or independently, so not needing someone else's help, essentially. And unfortunately, from the point that we're about 30 years old, we lose muscle that we don't use. So we really,
Exactly.
really need to work against that. And
Mm-hmm.
the most effective thing to do is resistance training. And that can even just be body weight exercises. And the second most effective thing to prevent that would be to consume a diet with sufficient amounts of protein. And so, to your point of like, why don't some people look like they work out? I mean, quite often it is because people just do the same thing over and over again, and they don't keep challenging themselves. So our muscles, they're very smart. They won't adapt to anything that we don't challenge them to do. So if you just keep doing, I've always done this leg extension press here on Mondays, 3 sets of 10 at 50 pounds, like for the last 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
no wonder you're not going to grow, because, or you're not going to improve, because you're not giving your body a stimulus to improve. Just like if you don't learn anything new, you just keep reading the same material, you're not going to learn anything new. So we need to keep, it's called progressive overload. So if we can add another repetition, we can add another set, or we can add a little bit more weight from week to week. And that's one of the beauties of resistance training, at least in the gym. You can pick up a heavier dumbbell very easily. um, yes, cardio is great also, of course, obviously, for heart health, for even cognitive health and things like that. Uh, in when it comes to weight loss, we don't want to rely on cardio as that being the main driver. Many people, they think, oh, I need to lose weight, I'm going to go for a 30-minute run every second day. Now, yes, it can help you, but it should not be the main means. And the reason being, again, our bodies adapt super, super quickly. So if you ran, I don't know, 3 miles the first time and it took you 30 minutes, the second time your body's already going to be more efficient at doing that, and so on. So that is how our body functions.
You talk about nutritional periodization. What is that exactly?
When it comes to nutritional periodization, essentially what that means is it helps us prevent yo-yo dieting and maintaining weight loss successfully in the long run. So pretty much just going about your weight loss in a strategic way, and not in just the way of, I want to lose weight, I'm going to do 6 weeks of super dieting and that's it. Most people, that's like their plan. I want to lose a certain amount, and they
Mhm.
might even think about how long, and then afterwards they don't think about the plan after the plan. They don't think about how do I maintain that. And
Mhm.
so when we talk about nutritional periodization, we want to think, okay, first of all, is our approach to how much we want to lose in that certain amount of time, is that realistic? Because that's often where most people go wrong. If they think 6 weeks, yes, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. Okay, how hard do you really want this to be, and how healthy is it for your body? It really depends on how much someone has to lose. Also, because if someone says that to me and they're 140 pounds and they want to be 120 pounds, very unrealistic that we achieve that. If someone is 300 pounds, maybe we can achieve that. That's a different story. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's part number one. The more important part, though, is okay, once we have lost that certain amount of weight, what do we do then? Here's the other mistake that many people make. They either just go back to their previous way of eating, or they are so afraid of gaining the weight back that they simply stay at super low calories, and eventually their metabolism adapts to that and it results into hormonal issues. And then also, if they want to lose weight again in the future, they have to drop calories even lower, and then the same thing again, even lower. And that's how people end up with what is kind of called metabolic adaptation. So like they hardly eat anything, but they don't lose any weight anymore, even though they really try. So we kind of after every diet, we want to make sure that we slowly and gradually teach our body again to burn more. So we bring our calories back up to what is technically your maintenance. So same amount of calories going in as what your body is burning. But again, we want to do that in a strategic way, because if we're simply saying, oh, I'm just going to eat intuitively now, your body will tell you to put the weight back on. Your body didn't actually want you to lose the weight in the first place, because your body's only job really is to get you surviving, or keep you alive, basically. And if it senses that there was a food shortage and now there's food available, it's going to send you extra hunger cues. It's going to send you extra urges to eat even more. So if you simply intuitively eat, you will put the weight back on. And so if we don't have a strategic approach for after our diet, it is very, very likely, like literally, the studies show that about 90% of the population is actually very successful at dieting. Unfortunately, 95 of those are going to regain the weight back. So we don't want that to happen, because in the long run, that's really, really not good for metabolic or hormonal health.
Okay. So how do you get people to beat their cravings? I guess that's when you're changing up your diet. And I mean, a lot of people that I know, they've been on several diets. If they're reaching out to you, they want to do something. You got to get them started. And then, like you said, you got to keep them on a pretty good path afterwards. And the cravings always seem to get in the way, especially if you're trying to
Mhm.
lose a lot of weight.
Great question. So again, there are several facets to that, and first one being not to over restrict, like to the mistakes that I kind of made, where you're completely forbidding yourself certain things, where you're saying, I can never have this, I'm cutting out something completely. And yeah, every now and then you'll find a person who's like, I haven't eaten sugar in 20 years and they're perfectly happy. Cool, all the
Mhm.
power to them. The majority of people are not going to be that person. The majority of people are going to want to have some dessert on Christmas. The majority of people are going to want to eat a slice of pizza once a year or so, or maybe more. So we need to find out, okay, how do we allow ourselves to have certain things in moderation and actually practice including them in moderation. Sometimes I have people say, oh, like, I love chocolate. I'm addicted to chocolate. If I have chocolate in the house, I'm going to have it all. And sometimes this whole approach of just simply not keeping it in the house is a very good approach, because if it's not there, you have the extra barrier of I need to
Hmm.
go somewhere to get it and so on. Yes, totally. But also sometimes it could be a good practice to just be like, okay, if you have two, could we practice for the next 2 weeks to include two pieces of chocolate, or maybe you can buy like the mini pack or something like that, and have that with your, I don't know, afternoon tea every day. Actually, at some point they're going to be like, I don't even want that anymore because I have to have it every day. It's not some, so it's kind of, it gets to a point of like it loses its appeal. So
Okay.
that's actually often a pretty decent strategy to practice this whole, oh, I have to have it, or I can't have something in moderation. The other thing when it comes to cravings, and that's actually super common, is that people don't eat enough protein, and protein is super satiating and also sends something in terms of your neural pathways to the brain of like, I'm satiated, or I'm happy. I don't need as much anymore. And just by not consuming enough protein, not consuming enough fiber, we don't have, or our gut doesn't have as much work to do. So it's kind of like bored and wants more. And therefore, then we have cravings popping up where it's like, give me something to do type of thing. But unfortunately, most of the time, those cravings are for something sweet or something more processed. So that would be probably my most practical recommendation for people if they're like, I have a sweet tooth, I always have cravings. Have you had enough protein and vegetables today? If the answer is no, have that first. And if you still then want something sweet afterwards, see if you can have like a piece or two of chocolate, and just practicing mindfulness around that enjoyment as well, because that's actually the third thing where we're just eating in a rush. We're not giving our body the chance to fully enjoy that we are eating, or get into that whole rest and digest nervous system sort of state. And instead, we're eating something while we're driving, while we're talking to someone on the phone. And how is your body supposed to recognize that it's actually got energy coming in, yet alone enjoy what you're eating? So
Hmm.
just taking a little bit more of a mindful approach to, can I eat less distracted? Can I maybe take a few deep breaths before I shove this into my mouth? Can I maybe not look at my screen at the same time? And honestly, it's going to make a huge difference to just simply that registering of like, hey, I've got food coming in. And then once we've eaten like the main meal, even just giving yourself a little bit of like a time limit and saying, okay, I'm going to wait 5 or 10 minutes. If I still want something sweet at that time, I'm going to allow myself something. But so often it's just such a habit that we go from like our main thing to, oh, I need something sweet now, I need to have a dessert. And we don't insert that break to make a better decision perhaps next time.
On the craving side, there are foods. So you talked a lot about whole foods, eating, 80, 90% whole foods, but there are a lot of ultra processed foods. You're just eating basically empty calories. And those foods are made to make you want to eat more of them. So it's kind of like
100%.
it's not a good cycle. And
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, to that point, even nowadays, even worse or even more, if we drink our calories, like literally your gut has nothing to do when it comes to digestion. So if you get your calories from sodas or even sugary
Mhm.
coffees or alcohol or so, those calories add up so easily. And that's really not the main bad thing about them. It really is that your body doesn't register them. And so it's pretty much as if you did not have those two, three, four, 500 calories coming in, and you have sending you cravings because it's got
Mhm.
nothing to do.
Well, we agree there for sure. So you also had an article on your website about limiting beliefs. So talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to weight loss and especially maintaining a certain weight loss and stepping into that new person that you want to be, the thing that's really often holding us back the most, or that's getting us to yo-yo back the most, is because we don't change our personality alongside. And unfortunately, oftentimes we want change. We want to see change without changing ourselves or without changing anything in our life. Like, it sounds so funny and kind of ridiculous because it's obvious to everybody. But I mean, truthfully, the majority of people, when they approach or start a weight loss journey, they don't think about who they need to become or how they need to change as a person. They just know that they're tired of seeing what they saw in the mirror, or tired of not having energy, or tired of not feeling super confident, but they don't really realize that that might mean, okay, maybe I can't go and celebrate with my friends every single Friday and just eat 3 pizzas and get super drunk. It doesn't necessarily register straight away, or they don't think about, okay, maybe if that means for the rest of my life I need to go and work out. You just think about the next 6 weeks, and there is something positive about just taking one step at a time, absolutely.
Mhm.
But essentially, if we want to see long-term change, we need to acknowledge that we need to become a different person and start thinking about, what would that future version of me choose in a certain scenario? What would that future version of me do first thing in the morning? And often we have those limiting beliefs that are so deeply ingrained, and they just sometimes come out through verbiage or through language that we use. Let's just say, I've never been able to lose weight, or weight loss is super hard. That's one that I hear very often. I'm like, okay, if you have that intrinsic belief, it's gonna be hard because
Right.
it's gonna become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're gonna make it hard, or something else, especially around the holidays. I'm gonna try to eat better this year around. You're already giving yourself a way out. Like, if you say, I'm gonna try to eat better, that essentially already means you might eat like a tiny bit better than the year prior, but you're not gonna really try to succeed or do it very well. I'm gonna try to limit the alcohol. Yeah. So we wanna really become very wary of how we talk to ourselves or talk about certain things. Even, yeah, nobody in my family's ever lost weight successfully before. I'm a middle-aged woman. During menopause, it's impossible to lose weight. Like, those sort of things, they're statements that there might be some truth to that, but if you keep telling yourself that, it will be your truth. Whereas if you look for the outliers and you say, no, look, I can show you 10 people right now that have successfully lost weight during menopause. It's not a law that's set in stone that nobody can lose weight during menopause or over the holidays or whatever. So if we don't work on our beliefs and how we talk to ourselves at the same time as addressing all these more quote unquote superficial things like protein intake, like vegetables and so on, we're not gonna really make it happen, or it's not going to happen, and we're eventually going to self-sabotage by stepping into those older versions of ourselves.
Yeah, and I've even had some conversations with people. Well, they've had them with me, and they're like, "Well, everybody in my family, they usually die of whatever, pick a chronic disease at the age of 55. So it doesn't matter what I do." But it's the same thing. If you believe that, you're never going to get past the age of 55. I mean, you're
Absolutely.
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So
Yeah, absolutely. And it's incredible how our mind affects our physiology. And the cool thing is that there is more and more research also coming out to back that up. There's literally, like, placebo studies are incredible. I absolutely think they're incredible. So, for instance, to your point of creatine, there was a study, I don't remember exactly at what year it was done, but there was a study with regards to creatine where they had a group take no creatine, but they thought they were taking creatine. And they had a group that was taking creatine, and they thought they were taking creatine. There was 4 different arms, and two of which were taking it, two of which were not taking it. And in within those groups, some were told that they were taking it, and the others weren't. Essentially, it really didn't matter what you were taking or what you weren't. It was just important what you were told you were taking. And that doesn't mean that creatine isn't effective. It is very effective, but it just means if you believe it to be effective, it's
yeah,
probably even more effective Whereas if you think like, oh, this is money down the drain, why am I even taking that? You might blunt the effects. And there was something out, another study where they gave people a something they called a weight loss shake. So some beverage containing protein, and one of them was actually with one of them they told them it was like 120 calories, so
Hmm.
quite low. And the other one they told that group, oh, it's actually like a mass gainer. It has 450 calories. And in truth, they both were the same exact amount of calories, about 200, but the leptin and ghrelin, so like the hunger stimulating hormones and the insulin release, was completely different from one group to the other, just according to what they believed the shake would do. So one group thinking this is a weight loss shake, the other group thinking this is a mass gainer shake. So it's so incredible, like what we believe about certain things. So truly, we need to all be more mindful of what we tell ourselves and just the things that we consume as well in terms of content, what we listen to, what we read, because it's all going to influence or motivate us or have the power to bring us down.
Couldn't agree more. It's the way you approach things, the way you think about things definitely impact. Can you maybe share a success story or two, clients you've had that have kind of come in at a certain whatever weight or had a certain plan that you helped them achieve and then were successful? Even after the 6 weeks, they're successful in the long term.
Yeah, and I like most of my success stories, I'll be honest, they're not like, oh, this person lost 150 pounds. There are more people that were or are similar to me, where they're like, I have maybe 20 pounds to lose and I work out, but I don't look like it. I work so hard. I think I'm eating well. Why don't I look like it?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had several women, but one in particular comes to mind. Her name is Hala, and she was doing like spin cycles, something 6 times a week and 3 times a week strength training, and just like going from diet to diet, always trying her very best. She also traveled a lot for work and for private life, and just yeah, literally, she was just like, Lisa, I don't know what to try anymore. Um, you're literally my last resort. After this, I'm just gonna resort to buying bigger clothes and be like, okay, I'm gonna enjoy my life, but I'm settling on being, chubby, sort of thing. And so just by teaching her, hey, she can even go out and like eat outside. You don't need to just eat out of Tupperware containers for the rest of your life, but you can also travel with that. You can, like truly live your life. She lost her weight, and that's all great and good. But the even cooler thing for me is that once we stopped working together and she maintained her weight well, she went through, so she got married. She then had a baby later on. She lost the baby weight again. And 4 years into it, she still has the abilities and capabilities of knowing how to manipulate her diet depending on what she wants to do at that stage in her life. So, for example, pre her wedding, she just cut her calories down a little bit to look a little bit leaner. But then afterwards, she didn't like yo-yo back. And then even throughout her pregnancy, she knew how to keep the weight gain minimal, but in a way that her baby would still be healthy. So she increased her calories a little bit. Post baby, again, she also knew how to get back to her previous weight. So for me, those are the success stories where it's like, no matter at what stage in your life, you know how to navigate your own nutrition with
Mm-hmm.
confidence and in a very healthy way.
Very cool. Very cool. So, how about you travel a lot? I mean, you're in Bolivia today, and you were talking about being a police officer in New Zealand. So, what have you learned about health, nutrition from your travels?
Well, there's a few things. So I think most people, or pretty much no matter where I go, people always think that food or dieting is always the hardest wherever they live because they only see the barriers. And I truly think, like, for instance, in the US, often people say, oh, it's so hard because, we're such a sedentary lifestyle. We don't walk to that many
Mm-hmm.
places. Everything is so convenient. Totally true. Absolutely. Every time I have been to the US, it's a nightmare almost finding like a sidewalk to walk to places. It's so much easier just to drive everywhere. And whereas here in Bolivia, most things are done by foot. You go to places like easily, I'm ramping up 12,000 steps here without even trying, sort of thing. But at the same time, in the US, you have the luxury of pretty much having availability of everything. So for example, here I cannot get whey protein and I cannot get it shipped here. So there is two supplement stores not too far from here, and they have all run out of whey protein. Whey protein, by all things, I mean, that's been around for how many decades now? That's not I'm not asking for like the latest thing, but they don't have whey protein anymore. On top of that, Greek yogurt costs like $10 because it's a
Wow.
rare thing. But on the flip side, you can get, of course, chicken and rice for like $1. So no matter where you go, people
Hmm.
see the barriers more than they see the opportunities. But of course, an overarching thing or theme that I do see globally is people seem to be leaner, healthier if they are able to live a more active, more healthy lifestyle
Hmm.
just from day to day things. For instance, my parents in Germany, my mom takes her bicycle to work and she does a lot of gardening. And last year when I was there in the summer, I was like, I'm curious how many steps she gets just from doing her everyday things. So I put my Apple Watch on her, and lo and behold, she got like 20,000 steps just from being a busy bee, basically.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's incredible. Whereas some clients that I work with or started working with in the US, they're like, oh, my average step count is 2,000. I'm like, oh my gosh. We want to get that up eventually. But I truly think, like, in the end, worldwide, people have more things in common than they have. So mentally and like just from the struggles that they're experiencing, then we have things that separate us. And I think just, yeah, overall it's been wonderful. I've been to 53 countries so far, and I have yet to have, or I don't want to, but I haven't had a negative experience really yet, in the sense of dangers when it comes to travel, or even like being in a situation where there was no good food available anywhere ever. Of course, you need to have a little bit of a level of preparation and planning, and I always try to situate myself somewhere close to a grocery store or somewhere where there's a gym nearby, and so on. So travel, like successful travel, also comes with experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So the patients that you've had, you kind of talked about one patient, but do you see that they're because of the program you put them on and they're kind of doing the right things from a food standpoint, an exercise standpoint, other things, do you see that they're sick less? Because I see
Mm.
same thing. If people aren't eating healthy, they're not exercising, they also seem to get sick more.
Oh, yes. No, you're touching on a very good point. I actually haven't thought about this in a really long time, but especially in fall or winter, and then suddenly I might have a client who's like, Lisa, normally I get sick like once a month throughout winter, or I have like one
Yeah.
really big cold that knocks me out for like a month. I didn't have that this year. And again, I think two of the biggest points there are protein intake and vegetables, because of course, if we're increasing vegetables, we're also optimizing our micronutrient content. But then on top of that, if we're layering that with more exercise, especially resistance training, that is also great for your immune system,
Mhm.
because you're learning to adapt to a stimulus every single day. So really, really great points. Actually, I haven't considered that particular aspect in a while.
Yeah. I've just noticed since I started doing kind of what we're talking about here, I haven't gotten sick in quite a while. So,
Awesome. Very cool feedback. Nice.
yeah. So food, exercise. So talk a little bit about like sleep,
Hmm.
purpose, community. Those are some other things we talk about on this show, just as far
Oh,
as
yes.
from a
All of that.
longevity standpoint. Yeah.
So important. So again, more and more research coming out when it comes to actually things that are holding us back from weight loss, and one of them being high cortisol levels, so high stress levels all around.
Hmm.
And that can come from many things. Often when we think of stress, we just think like, oh, big workload or emotional stress. And yes, emotional stress, actually, that is super important. Like if someone is going through a divorce, it's probably not the best time to try a weight loss journey or something like that. But likewise, other things we don't give that much value to, and they actually are the biggest movers. For example, sleep. So again, the research really, really clear. If you sleep 5 hours on average, a lot more of the weight that you lose, if you lose any, comes from muscle rather than fat than if you sleep 7 or 8 hours on average. So one of the best things we can do to accelerate fat loss would be to prioritize sleep, because it also helps us get the cortisol levels down, the stress levels down. And again, cortisol is a good thing if it's in short short amount. So your training is going to induce a bit of a cortisol release, and just in general, in the morning, we want cortisol to be high, but over the course of the day, we want it to taper off. So we don't want that chronically, oh, I'm going from my training to my work, and then from here to this and this and this until you fall into bed. We need to learn to switch off more. So even if it is things like taking a few deep breaths before we eat, as we talked about earlier, or going for a 10-minute walk after your lunch, or a 10-minute walk before you come back home, or something like that, to just down regulate
Mm-hmm.
and set yourself into a bit more of a relaxed state. That's going to be a really big driver. And on top of that, I mean, we're kind of going through what they call loneliness crisis, or depression is all everywhere. So on that front, seeking out social connection, ideally in person, is so valuable. Or like even getting a pet and petting that from time to time has some positive effects. And I'll be the first to say, like, I'm actually more of an introverted person, and of course, being a traveler, maintaining or fostering good relationships is not super easy. So I have to actually make myself go out there and be amongst people, because if not, I would happily be in this apartment and at the gym for, a month, and nobody needs to bother me necessarily. But I know how important that is in the long run. So
Mm-hmm.
I've started to, like, once a day, I make myself go to a cafe, and I'm not putting in my headphones. I'm not looking at my phone, at least for 5 minutes, and saying, looking the barista in the eye, and maybe complimenting the cleaning lady on something. And so just making yourself a little bit more approachable. Or same thing at the gym, not necessarily always using my headphones, and maybe saying a kind word to someone sometimes, and that can go a long way. So I do think we need to practice or approach social connections in the way that we approach other things, and just not just assuming that they come naturally without putting in any effort.
Couldn't agree more. Very well said.
Thank you.
So, first step, somebody wants to embark on I'll call this a new journey from a health standpoint. Where would somebody start? First step.
If you're really serious about it, I would honestly say record your food intake for 2-3 weeks, weighing your foods out. If you're like, I don't take me quite that far, I'm not going to get there, simply the recommendation of eating more protein and more vegetables, that would
Mm-hmm.
be the first thing to think about. I think we are often too focused on what to cut out, what to stop doing, when we actually benefit just as much, or maybe even more, from thinking about what should I include more of. Because if you're eating more vegetables and more lean protein, you're probably going to eat less of the processed crap as well, because you're more satiated, because your cravings are down, and you have more energy. So that would really be sort of the second thing, if you can't commit to recording your food for a little while.
Okay, great, great. And then what are your thoughts on cooking at home versus, I mean, we kind of talked about eating out. I love to eat out as well, but I mean, people I think are eating out. The majority of people that eat out go through a fast food versus sitting down at a restaurant and enjoying their food or coffee or tea or whatever. So what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, and that's really the issue, because I mean, if we look at eating out from, let's just say, like a Mediterranean diet, or like if we think of eating out as like an Italian culture, picture an Italian family, they're all sitting around the table at a restaurant, and they order the first course, and they're sharing that, and they're talking for an hour and having a glass of wine and enjoying the view. An hour later, they're bringing out the main course and enjoying that, and the kids play and run around, and then an hour later you have your small little dessert. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this scenario of eating out. On the contrary, I would say that this is so good for your soul, and for, being social and everything that we just talked about. uh, that's wonderful. But the issue is exactly as you were saying, that if we're making DoorDash or these kind of delivery services, or drive through our go to, where we're shoving the food into our mouth while we're
Mhm.
still driving, and by the time you get home it's probably already eaten. That's the issue, because restaurants do always use more oils, more sugars, more, and not the good kind of oils. And so it's higher in calories on average by far. And even if it does show the little calorie label or whatever, they're not always accurate. And on top of that, there's something about the food preparation process that kind of like primes our mind, our soul, our digestion to like, hey, okay, she's getting up, she's looking into the fridge, she's assembling this and this. Ooh, there's a smell. Ah, I can feel the texture of this. And you're already putting yourself into that state of like, ah, I'm about to eat. So
Hmm.
your digestive tract is literally already starting that kind of process of preparation for it. And I think also if we're never preparing food ourselves. Some kids, they don't even know what foods look like in their original state.
That is
And you're like,
correct. Yeah.
talking about broccoli or whatever, all they have ever seen is like, or they probably never even ate broccoli, but they don't know what it originally looks like anymore. So if people listening to this have kids, I would highly encourage to include them in some way, shape, or form, even in the grocery shopping. But if it's not the shopping, then maybe like saying, hey, can you help me chop this? It might take 10 times as long as if you did it yourself, but that's cool. The kid's actually going to learn something and maybe going to spark an interest. So yeah, I truly think if we can prepare more of our foods ourselves, and we're only going to do ourselves a favor. And there are so many super easy, 15, 20-minute meals that we can prepare or chuck something in the crock pot and hardly takes any preparation time.
Hmm.
So people can really tell me that it's always faster to go through a drive-through or even like DoorDash. By the time you go through the app for 10 minutes and select what you want, and then it's more expensive. Yeah, I'm totally with you on the home cooking front.
So we always conclude. My last question is about kind of your favorite go-to, easy to make, inexpensive recipe.
Hmm. Well, I like to keep it super simple, even simpler than just having recipes, to the point of I especially initially get my clients to think of a meal just in in threes. So essentially we want to pick our protein source. What protein source do we have available? Is it fish? Is it a low-fat Greek yogurt? Is it eggs or whatever? And then adding a vegetable or fruit to that. So in the case of yogurt, you had some blueberries with that.
Hmm.
Or in the case of fish, maybe we can add some asparagus to that, and then adding a healthy carb and or protein source depending on what you prefer or how active you were as well. So it could be that you chuck some oats into your yogurt, or that you add some rice to your fish, or that you add some healthy nuts or something like that. And I'm really trying to keep it ultra simple in that way,
Hmm.
because I think even just having a recipe in front of us sometimes complicates things a little bit too much. And again, like I'm coming from it or at it from an educational perspective. I really want people to understand what's in their food. So if I just give you a recipe, they might not necessarily know what of this is a good protein source or what of this is a good
Hmm.
carb source or so. So just understanding, thinking of it more as like a category can actually help you. And then aiming for, okay, half of my plate should be vegetables, maybe a quarter should be the protein, and a quarter should be a healthy carb or fat source. And that kind of like makes the assembling so much easier. And also if you're like in front of a buffet or so, makes the choosing so much easier.
Hmm. Okay, great. Yeah, we do a Sunday dinner here every other week. And so I'm going to go to the farmer's market to pick my vegetables. Whatever looks good, I'm going to buy it. I'm going to go to where I get my protein from a butcher. And I've already got carb sources here. So, and then I'll just figure out what to put together based on what they have and what looks good at the time. So,
Very cool. Like it. Nice.
yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for being on the show. Great
And
conversation.
Ken, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, hopefully this was helpful to your listeners.
I think it will be. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Likewise.
As I mentioned a few minutes ago, my sponsor is Cleveland Kitchen, the leader in fresh fermented foods. Try Cleveland Kitchen's crunchy and delicious krauts, kimchi, pickles, packed with probiotics to support your gut health while elevating your meals from ordinary to extraordinary. Cleveland Kitchen, where taste meets wellness. Find it in the produce or deli section of your local grocery retailer or visit clevelandkitchen.com for more information. And please follow the show every week where you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. Leave comments below or on my website, Eat Better Food Today.